Hello everyone, I want to show you my results. I purchased the VIP subscription plan on September 23rd and up to today, October 13th, so in about 3 weeks, I managed to achieve quite an impressive result. Roughly $20,000, over $20,000 in net profit. Maybe I'll specify the exact amount here or at the end of the video, but the result is definitely over $20,000 in net profit in a relatively short period. The main result, all of this was achieved using just 3 coins, and all of them were tied specifically to situations with quite substantial funding rates. There was also some profit from a small exchange rate spread, and there were other coins involved, but here I want to show the main results. The first situation where it was possible to earn quite well from funding was with the Kaita coin on the Levex exchange. And the second one, at first I used BingX, then switched to Hyperliquid because the rate was a bit lower there. It was actually my first time using and even hearing about the Levex exchange. I found out about it from a chat, and in fact I learned about this whole situation from the chat. The guys wrote that it was the Kaita coin on the Levex exchange, so I registered and decided to give it a try. And I actually managed to get a pretty good result even with this coin. If I'm not mistaken, I entered it 4 times. I always entered with limit orders or very small orders. You can even see at the bottom how many pages I have. There's also another coin here which I'll talk about later. I entered with 10 coins at a time. In this case, I used limit orders so that the opening price would be as good as possible. Initially, I entered with Levex plus BingX, and if I'm not mistaken, I stayed in for about 6 funding payments, which amounted to around $400 in funding. Now I'll find where you can see the funding payout, where you can check the funding payout. You'll be able to see it here now. Basically, I'll show all the funding payouts at once. At first, as you can see, it shows a minus, but that's not actually the case. It's just that the funding rate is minus, let's say, 1%. Well, in this case, you could see what the percentage was, about minus 1.2%. But in reality, that's actually a plus. On the BingX exchange, I opened a short position. And there, the funding wasn't negative, but there was still a good profit. So I was holding the position for quite a while. You can probably even see it somewhere around here. I think I exited, but probably not here yet. For example, I exited at 22, then re-entered at 11. It's all the same coin. I'll show it now on both Hyperliquid and BingX. And of course, as long as you keep the position open, you receive funding. I exited at a pretty good rate actually, and after that I didn't stay in because I re-entered 4 times. The funding would appear, then drop, then rise again. So let's take a look at the P&L here, for example. Of course, it's not very convenient on Levex because the P&L is only shown for closed orders. Here, it looks like I closed with a single order. Maybe the limit order is recorded properly here. So on Levex, the position was closed with a profit of $1,089. The position on BingX was closed, realized at $1,345. This takes into account the funding rate, but it's quite small, so basically not counted, and the funding was closed with a profit of $425, as I already showed. Then I moved on to Hyperliquid. Here, unfortunately, it will also be quite difficult to show anything, but at least in this way you can see right away. Here there are only very small withdrawals, also for funding, and I stayed here for quite a while. The first entry, Levex plus BingX, ended up earning $161 net. That's after deducting all these commissions. All the positive and negative funding amounts. Then I entered Hyperliquid. It came out to about $73. I didn't stay there long at all to collect it. And then, on a larger scale, I managed to take out $448 net. Now I'll show these accruals in more detail. There, I stayed longer, and as far as I remember already, the funding was much fatter. Starting from about this moment, but up to around 14, almost even 15, and it held up pretty well. And the last time I went in, I managed to take out about $130 net, so it turned out pretty well to make money on funding here. I'll also attach another screenshot where it will be more clearly visible from Hyper with more accurate screenshots, because unfortunately when you go to the closed P&L section on Levex, you can't see it all very well. To see, because that was accordingly only the first situation. Then I also exited, as you can see, with several hundred coins, sometimes with limit orders, sometimes at market price. The next situation also happened on the Levex exchange. Also, if I'm not mistaken, I saw an opportunity in the chat to make money again on funding. This time the coin was called M. Unfortunately, I can't find it right now, but at least I'll show you something else. I traded the M coin from the BingX and MEX exchanges. Then I also added Orbit, and now I'll show you how all of them were closed. I earned funding on the first entry with the M coin, totaling $4,500. Unfortunately, I probably won't be able to show this here because there will be too many entries, but let me at least try to find something as an example to show you. It should probably be somewhere starting from the 7th page. Here, this is when I just entered. As you can see, the funding was very substantial. And here are the payouts, $300, $200 each. Almost all of that was pure funding because on Mexi and BingX, the rate didn't really eat into it. Here you see $300, and it kept coming in like that for quite a while. At some point, if I'm not mistaken, I was even getting $600 at a time. Then the rate started to drop as well. But I still kept holding on, if I'm not mistaken, even waited through the night. So it turned out that on the first entry, I made $3,400 in pure profit. I'll also attach the screenshot somewhere here. I sat there for exactly 24 hours, from 9 p.m. one day to 9 p.m. the next day. I barely even had time to rest. Just a couple of hours went by, literally. And then I went back in again, this time with a larger position. And this time I got a result. Levex paid me $11,000 in funding, a couple hundred more there. A couple $100 in funding, I mean. Mix and Orbit took about $1,200, and BingX also took some. I'll attach and show all these screenshots now. Also, on BingX and other exchanges, it's more convenient to show. I managed to earn $9,500 net from the second entry into this coin in almost exactly 2 days, just 1 hour short. You can see here the most interesting payouts. Here they were quite small for a while. And closer to the end, well, as this funding was coming to a close, they started to increase again, back to $200, $300, and I went in for a third time as well. We'll get to that in a moment. I was in this coin for just 3 hours in total and managed to make a clean profit of $1,050. Levex gave out $1,300 in funding, and a bit was eaten up by other exchanges, plus the position itself took a small bite, so there was a bit of a loss due to the exchange rate. As you can see, $300, $400, $500, and like I said, even $600 per hour was possible. I was pulling out from Levex on funding, and here literally these were the last payouts for the 3 hours I was in. After that, the funding was completely eaten up to zero. As you can see, even $700, the very last hours were the most profitable. Let's move on to BingX. Here you can also see, apparently I opened it by accident, that I went in several times, 1, 2, 3 times even on BingX. You can see here that the main portion of the funding was eaten up on other exchanges, specifically on BingX because that was where the largest position was. Here as well you can see the P&L. On the second entry, even more funding was eaten up, but at that point about $11,000 had been paid out on Levex. There might be some calculations there. I might attach them here as well. And the third entry was when I went in for 3 hours. You can see the time here, from 19:20 at the opening to 22:10. So I caught 3 payouts at 2000, 2100, and 2200, and then exited. The funding went completely to zero. It dropped off. Now let's try to find it on Mexi. Here I very clearly see the M coin. The funding fee will literally be a couple $100 on Orbit as well because the positions were quite small. Because as always on Mexi and on Orbit, there are pretty small limits. On Orbit, at that time, I was also trading just a little, using it, but I also used it for currency spreads or for funding. And here you can see the funding fee of minus $85. So I entered with Orbit twice and got minus $16. I'll also attach all the more detailed calculations here so you can count everything. And unfortunately, as I mentioned on Levex, you can't see the final P&L, how much the position was closed for. That's why I'll attach screenshots, because until you close the position, write down how much funding has accumulated for you in total and whether your position was closed in profit or loss, specifically due to the price spread, so that you can have a reference point. Accordingly, if I'm not mistaken, it was possible to get more than $14,000 from the M coin and about $15,000 in total from the Kite coin, thanks to the Levex exchange. After that, as of now, for more than 2 weeks, if I understand correctly, there haven't been any more fundings from Levex. But thanks for that as well. And recently, just yesterday, in fact, there was another main situation that paid off quite well. It was the Kwai coin. With the Aster exchange, the situation there was more interesting. And just in case you were wondering why there hadn't been any great results for so long, as you can see, that was on October 3rd. So for about 10 days, there weren't any big results. That doesn't mean there weren't any results at all. I just don't show them here. There, I was able to make about $200, $300, or $500. Also from funding and exchange rate spreads, I just don't cover that here so as not to waste time. Yesterday's situation, which I managed to earn over $6,000 in 2 trades on the KAI coin. The first entry was also made to receive funding. Now I'll find where you can see the funding details in more depth. It's also inconvenient, unfortunately, but if anything, I'll attach more detailed screenshots. There should be a section specifically for funding, but for some reason I can't find it. Here it should be somewhere around here. I had already used the Astardex exchange before because there were other opportunities with it as well, which are no longer shown here. And so the KAI coin itself was quite profitable too. It was generating rewards on its own. I earned over $1,000 in funding during the first entry. I went long on Astardex and the funding was negative as well, meaning the rate was minus 2%. And on the other side there was MEX. I'll find it for you now as well. So MEX and also the Jew exchange, a Chinese exchange, I'll show you now. Unfortunately here with MEX, the situation also turned out to be not very pleasant. The position was closed by liquidation. You can see it was liquidated, but even so, I still ended up with a good profit in this situation. Here, other positions were opened. This price didn't exist on the chart. It's the index or fair price as it's called on MEX. It turned out that right at the very beginning, when I had just opened the position, you can see the closing time, only an hour had passed, and already minus $1,500 was closed, even though I was using 2 times leverage. It's good that this wasn't my main position, just 300 coins in total. The main position was on the Jew exchange. As you can see, I even have a coin open right now. I'm monitoring it. Most likely after recording this video, I'll enter a position. As you can see, this was also opened by accident. I entered 3 times on the first entry. I ended up holding the coin for about 12 hours. The main result was achieved thanks to the first entry, which was about $4,500. Because the order book froze on the Aster exchange, basically no orders could be placed, you couldn't do anything at all, while the coin was moving very actively on other exchanges. And in the end, this has already happened before on Aster, so you need to be careful with this, as just a couple of weeks ago, many positions were liquidated on one coin for the same reason. So basically, it froze here and then reopened at a high price. For example, you can see the price was $15, $16, $17 at that moment. Let's go to the Jew exchange, the Chinese one. There was no such price there. As you can see here, there was a spike, but that was at a different time. At that moment, the price was around $13, if I'm not mistaken. In general, the point was that I managed to close, not by choice and with a rather large price spread. The only option was to struggle for a long time closing with limit orders, hoping that your limit would get filled and so on. But overall, it turned out that $1,050 came in from funding on the first attempt. On the Aster position, the profit was $10,800. This was because it got stuck and then the coin opened at a higher price. As I already showed, on MEX it was minus $1,500. And the position on Jew on the first attempt was also minus $5,800. There wasn't really any funding eaten up on the Jew exchange because it was, and still is, minus 1.01%. The second entry was a bit later. I waited until everything calmed down on Aster when it was unwinding. Actually, I can even show you now. I'll find it and show you what it looked like. The price was just standing still, literally like a dotted line. And then it shot up sharply when it opened. As I said, the second entry was when everything had already settled down. I waited until the exchange finished unwinding so I wouldn't put my position at risk anymore. And that was probably around 4 or maybe 2 in the morning. Let me find it now. Yeah, so on the 23rd, I closed my position, sat for a couple of hours, watched what was happening with the exchange, and then opened a new one. Yes, the funding rate was already lower by then. It wasn't dropping as much as last time, $500 and almost $500. but I still managed to make $1,700 net on the second try. I earned $1,780 in funding on Astar. The position itself was at minus $2,600. I'll probably attach a screenshot here as well, or I can just show it right here. Basically, everything will be visible. Here you can see how I opened and closed positions. If I'm not mistaken, I was opening with 50 or 100 coins at a time. I closed them the same way. Yes, it takes more time, but you get a better price when opening and closing. So basically, you can see all the closings, all the losses for each order. There are quite a lot of them here. And it turns out that on Jew, as you could already see in the screenshot, there was a position with a profit of $1,000, well, $1,500 and another $1,000. Here I combined them right away when he mentioned it for a total of $1,700 profit. That included both the second and third entries because there were only about 30 minutes between them since the funding rate dropped. You can even see now how it was with the payouts, and then it came back again. As soon as it came back, I re-entered once more as well. Here you can see that there isn't even a gap in the accruals. Here, if I'm not mistaken, this is exactly where I exited, and then the funding started to rise again. You see it's already $360, and then the payout started coming in nicely again, and by morning I exited. I had to stay up all night, but that's $1,700 from the second entry. That's basically it. I'll indicate the final figure, the total result, somewhere here, all from just 3 coins. These were fairly simple situations where you just needed to be attentive, open and close positions properly, and also keep an eye on how everything was unfolding. That's the result I got. And there were also other coins, as I mentioned. I'm just not listing them here so as not to waste the video's time. Even so, the video turned out to be quite long. I wish you the same kind of awesome results as soon as possible. Let's keep going and not stop. I also wanted to add, for many this is probably an important point regarding my experience and use of capital. First of all, I already had experience in crypto, I knew what longs and shorts were, how to do all of that, and I was familiar with exchanges and how everything worked. I had already gotten into crypto many years ago, figured things out, and so on, but for the last 2 years, I hadn't been involved in crypto at all. Only in May, at the end of May, and the beginning of June this year, I returned to crypto and exclusively for funding and basis spreads, but all summer I was only working with listings and basis spreads, and honestly I wasn't really making any money, maybe $200 or $300. I didn't really understand that there were other ways to do things. In August I saw the scanner channel, saw the kinds of results people were getting, and realized you could also earn from funding, including long-term funding. As I showed with my own results, here it was always about long-term funding. Not just a single payout, like 2% and that's it, but something that lasts a long time, even if the percentage is lower. That got me interested, so I decided to buy the VIP plan right away, so I could interact more effectively, get advice and help, and enjoy all the perks that come with that plan. The capital I used during all this time was usually between $5,000 and $8,000, with an average of about 10. But in those situations I showed you, there was about $20,000 on the M coin, and on the Quai coin, which I have open on the screen right now, I also used about $20,000. This is roughly the maximum deposit that was used here, maybe around $24,000 or $25,000, but that's about the range. But most of the time I use $6,000 to $8,000, with the average being about 10, though sometimes there are some good opportunities. If I see something really promising, like those situations I mentioned, I immediately use a larger deposit. That's why the profits end up being much better. Basically, there's nothing more to add. As I said, I had no experience with funding, and so starting almost from scratch, I just knew how to open things up. I figured it out and achieved quite a good result in a fairly short time.